want to acknowledge and thank the candidates tonight for their commitment to running. I also, in light of what Sheila said, I want to acknowledge their spouses as well, and the family members of ours who give so much. And right from the beginning of when we throw our name into the ring, our spouses pay a price for us doing this, and they often do not get any of the attention that the rest of us get, or often the thanks that we get either. So thank you, Sheila, and thank you to the spouses of the other candidates. I want to also thank the volunteers that have come out again to help us this year. We've had dozens of volunteers. This is the 5th election in 10 years. Many of the same people have come back time and time again to help us, and we're just thrilled to have that kind of support and have people coming out in the way that they do. I also want to thank the constituents of Cypress Hills Grasslands. We live in the best place in Canada, and they have given me the privilege of serving them over the last 10 years. And tonight we're here again to ask for your support through another session of Parliament. It's been a quick 10 years. For the first 6, for those of us who were in opposition, it was fairly frustrating. Jean Chrétien was Prime Minister to begin with, and he early on decided that he was going to leave, and so we spent a couple of years really with the Liberal government not getting a lot done while he was kind of winding down. And Paul Martin came in and took his place, and if you remember, Mr. Martin never did get going, and so there were another 2 years there that were really wasted in terms of our country's potential. In 2006, of course, some things changed, and we were able to come to government, and the last 4 years have been so very different. I was actually glad to hear last night Michael Ignatieff on TV acknowledging the fact that whereas a couple of weeks ago he just said that he was going to make sure that he tried to bring us down on the budget, last night he was much more honest and straightforward in saying that yes, we are going to try to work to form some sort of an arrangement with other parties so that we can actually take over the government of Canada. When they, if they want to bring people down on a budget, that obviously is a confidence motion that would entail someone else coming to power. And it was good to hear him come forward and finally talk about the fact that he was making arrangements. You can use the word coalition, or I actually prefer, I think, the word concoction, because when you take a look at what we will have, we'll have a dash of Liberal entitlement, a splash of NDP fiscal responsibility, and a can full of Quebec separatism. I don't really know what that's going to look like, but I know one thing, it's going to be very expensive for every one of you in this room. In 2008, the entire globe went into a recession, and Canada was affected by that, as every other nation around the world had been. Interestingly enough, the recession actually impacted us far less than it did many other nations. And one of the reasons for that was because of the tax cuts that had been made prior to 2008. Stephen Harper's government came to power. When we came in 2006, one of the things we had promised was that we were going to bring in tax cuts, and we have consistently done that. In fact, the average family right now is saving $3,000 per year on their taxes from what they were paying when we came to government in 2006. Obviously, we had some economic issues in 2008. The government's response was to come forward with the Economic Action Plan, which by every account has been a very successful plan to meet the needs of Canada, and that it has worked well over the last 3 years. Really tonight what I'm here to tell you is that we want to continue that path of low taxes, that path of restrained spending, and that path of stable government. We're going to try to focus on 5 priorities, and those are all priorities that impact each one of us. They are the things of creating jobs through training, trade, low taxes, supporting families through a whole number of initiatives, including the family tax cuts, more support for seniors and caregivers, eliminating the deficit by 2014, 2015. That is something that we would all like to see done as quickly as possible. We want to focus on making our streets safe. If you've been following the news at all, you know that our government has been focused on justice issues and has worked hard and long to try to pass legislation that would protect Canadians. And the 5th one is to stand on guard for Canada by doing things like cracking down on human smuggling, strengthening the Canadian Armed Forces, building our reputation internationally. So I want to talk a little bit for a few minutes tonight about those different areas and some of the things that we have done and would like to do. I'm sure that 10 minutes isn't going to cover all of that, so maybe later in questions I can bring a few more of those things out. Just in terms of taxes, I think you know well that taxes have been reduced since we came to power. GST has been reduced twice, income taxes have been reduced, personal exemptions have been raised, and as I mentioned, that saved you about $3,000 per year. By 2012, corporate tax rate in Canada will be the lowest in the G7. And actually, I have to give some thanks to the Liberals for that, because they supported us when we were doing that in 2008, 9, and 9, 10, and they were with us on that. The tax cuts that took place this January to lower the corporate tax rate had been put in place 3 years ago. And so the tax cuts have already taken place. If someone's going to change corporate taxes, which the Liberals claim they are, those are tax hikes. Those are not anything but tax hikes. They will have to go back and hike taxes. And it has been clear, economists have told us that if they go through with their plan, it could cost us up to $280,000 in Canada to do that. We put in place the small business hiring credit this year to try to help small businesses. The last couple of years, EI premiums have been frozen. They were going to go up this year. The whole program is separate from the government, and there was a decision made that they needed to raise the premiums. We put a program in place to help small employers hire and to keep new employees by absorbing the cost of the EI premiums. We've continued our accelerated capital cost allowance, and I can tell you we are not going to be raising taxes as the other parties have promised you they will be doing. In terms of things like training, one of the things that we've pushed over the last year and a half is work sharing. And that has been a very successful program. And interestingly enough, that actually came out of a suggestion that was made here in Swift Current when Minister Flaherty was here for his budget consultations last year. One of the employers made a suggestion that work sharing would be a very handy thing for them to have. That was put in the budget, and when it was put in, Minister Flaherty referenced the meeting in Swift Current. We've put targeted initiatives in for older workers. For young people, we've strengthened the Student Summer Jobs Program. We're making more scholarships and bursaries available. For the first time, this is interesting, I never knew this before, but scholarships and bursaries were always taxable before. We have made them tax-free. It just seems to be common sense that they would be. We're putting in more flexibility in repaying student loans for people who are working part-time in particular. And so those are some of the things that we have done and that we want to do in those areas. In terms of trade, we've concluded bilateral trade deals around the world. Interestingly enough, in 13 years, the Liberals did only 1 or 2 trade deals. And since we've gotten in, we've been able to do 8 of them. Those are critical for those of us in Western Canada, especially those of us who participate in agriculture. We need to trade around the world. Finally, there's someone who's taking a lead on those trade issues, and Jerry Ritz has done a phenomenal job of selling Canadian agriculture around the world, of getting these trade agreements. And we have more of them that we want to see done. We've been working with India, working with China, working with the EU, trying to get agreements with them because we want to trade, we want to do more trade with them than we have. The result of all of these things, just in terms of the jobs, has been that we've created 480,000 new jobs. We have created more jobs. We have more jobs now, or more people employed now than we did before the recession. And if you compare that to the United States, it's actually remarkable, because in the United States, they've lost 8 million jobs, and they've created 1.3 million jobs. So the difference between our countries in terms of job creation has been very, very notable. We want to work on protecting our families, and that has been a key from the time that we've come into government. As I mentioned, we reduced GST, we raised personal exemptions, we put in place the tax-free savings accounts, which have been extremely popular with people because they finally have a place they can put their money and invest it. I think these will come to rival RSPs in the future for investment and retirement vehicles for people. We want this year to introduce a family caregiver tax credit. So there's a tax credit for those who've taken on the responsibility of caring for a parent or an infirm relative. We have introduced income splitting for seniors, and I have people come up to me all the time and say, this was a really substantial thing. This is an important thing that you did for us as a couple. We've been glad to do that. We've increased the age credit twice in order to allow people to put more money.
1 minute left.
1 minute, okay, thank you. In order to allow people to make more money without tax consequences, we put $400 million of income into low-income housing for seniors. Those are some of the things that we've tried to do just in that area of creating jobs and trying to protect families and protect some of the low-income folks that in this time need help. It's important that we have this discussion tonight because I think you're going to find that there is a huge difference between our parties, and there is a huge difference between having a stable government that you've had over the last 4 years and some of the reckless proposals that have been made. Some of the parties have promised up to $28 billion in new spending, and I just don't think that I or you or the constituents of Cypress Hills Grasslands can afford those expensive promises. Thank you.